used to think being locked inside your own house would make you feel safe, protected. But when someone else makes sure you cannot leave, that same safety becomes a prison. That was the night I learned escape is not always possible. It was July of 2016. I was living with my parents and younger sister in a 2-story home on the outskirts of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The house was old, built in the 1940s, and had that creaky, uneven floor kind of charm. Our summers there were always humid, and nights felt heavier, the air still and quiet. On that particular Friday night, we had just finished a family barbecue in the backyard. Around 11, we all went inside. My parents went to bed first. My sister retreated to her room with her headphones, and I stayed downstairs scrolling through my phone on the couch. I remember the time clearly, 11:37 p.m., because I had just checked the clock above the television before hearing the first sound. It was faint but sharp, a metallic click, like the sound of a padlock snapping shut. At first, I dismissed it. Our neighbor often worked late in his shed. But a few minutes later, I heard it again, this time from the opposite side of the house. Another metallic snap. I got up, walked quietly to the back door, and tried the knob. It would not turn. Confused, I twisted harder. The knob moved slightly, but the door was stuck tight, like something had jammed it from outside. My chest tightened. I quickly tried the side door by the garage. Same thing, it rattled, but it would not budge. By then, my stomach felt heavy with unease. I went upstairs and woke my dad. He came down, half asleep and annoyed, until he saw how the back door refused to open. His face changed instantly. He went straight to the front door, unlocked it, and pulled. It gave an inch before catching hard, like someone had run a heavy bolt across the outside frame. I swear, I saw his hands shake when he tried again, harder. Nothing. The door was sealed. He told me to check every window. I ran room to room, pushing up on the latches. Not one of them would slide open. It was as if someone had wedged nails or screws into the frames. Even the small basement windows were stuck. That was when it hit us. We were locked inside. Not by accident. By someone who wanted us trapped. My mom woke up and my sister came out of her room, confused and scared. My dad whispered for us to stay calm and to gather in the living room while he called the police. He dialed 911 and explained in a hushed but urgent tone that someone had bolted us inside our own home. The operator said officers were being dispatched, but it might take 20 minutes. We sat together in silence, listening. Every creak of the old house made my skin crawl. And then came the sound that froze all of us. Slow, deliberate footsteps on the porch. They were heavy, moving from the front door to the window beside it. We held our breath. Then, a faint scraping noise, like metal dragging along glass. I will never forget the look on my mom's face as she gripped my sister's hand. My dad motioned for us to stay low. He picked up the fireplace poker and stood by the stairs. The footsteps moved again, this time circling toward the side door. A second later, something rattled hard against it, testing it from the outside. We were trapped, and whoever was out there knew it. The minutes crawled. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every shadow through the curtains felt alive. The scraping returned at the back door, followed by a hollow knock. Not polite, not playful, just one slow, heavy knock. My sister started crying quietly. I put my arm around her and whispered that the police were coming. I tried to believe it myself. At 12:04 a.m., my dad's phone rang. It was the dispatcher saying officers were only a few blocks away. Relief flooded me, but it lasted less than a second because just then, the back door handle began to twist violently. Whoever it was, they were not giving up. The sound of sirens broke through the night. A moment later, red and blue lights flashed against the living room walls. We heard pounding boots outside, then voices yelling. My dad shouted back that we were inside and the doors were sealed. For a few tense minutes, the officers struggled before prying open the front door with tools. When they finally burst in, we rushed out to the porch. The humid night air felt like freedom, but it was tainted by what we saw next. Every single door had been bolted shut with thick metal brackets drilled into the frame. Our windows had been pinned with long screws wedged deep into the siding. It was precise, planned. Someone had spent real time preparing this. The officers searched the property and surrounding streets, but found nothing. No footprints, no vehicle, no sign of who had done it. The only clue was a small pile of unused screws near the shed in the backyard. We stayed in a hotel that night. The next morning, daylight made it all feel almost unreal. But walking back into the house and seeing those drilled brackets still clinging to the door frames was the most disturbing sight of my life. The police could not explain it. They said it might have been a targeted prank, though the word prank felt insulting after what we experienced. Nothing was stolen. No windows were broken. Whoever did it did not want to get inside. They only wanted us trapped. For weeks afterward, my sister refused to sleep in her own room. My parents installed a full security system, cameras, motion lights. But none of that erased the feeling that someone had studied us, our house, our routines, long enough to set that up. Even now, years later, I cannot stand the sound of a door lock clicking shut. It makes my chest tighten, because I know locks are not always there to keep danger out. Sometimes they are there to keep you in, and that thought has never stopped haunting me. It was August of 2019, one of those thick summer nights where the air feels like it is pressing down on you. I was driving back from a friend's bonfire a little after midnight. I live in a rural part of Virginia where back roads twist for miles through farmland and forest. Normally, I avoided shortcuts late at night, but that evening, I wanted to shave 10 minutes off the drive. That decision has haunted me ever since. The shortcut was a road called Miller's Lane. It was a narrow dirt path that cut between cornfields, barely wide enough for one car at a time. I turned onto it, my headlights catching the dust as the tires crunched along the dry ground. It was dead quiet, no other cars, no houses, no lights except the stars above. For the first few minutes, it was just peaceful and empty. But after about a mile, I noticed something strange. The corn on the left side looked disturbed, like it had been pushed aside in a long line, almost as if something large had moved through it parallel to the road. I tried not to think about it and kept driving. The lane curved sharply downhill. When I reached the bottom, my headlights lit up something I was not expecting, a barricade. Thick logs had been dragged across the road, piled high and wedged tight, blocking it completely. I slowed to a stop, confused and annoyed. I figured it was construction or some kind of maintenance, but then I noticed there were no signs, no equipment, no reason for it to be there. Just logs and branches stacked deliberately. I shifted into reverse to back up the hill. That was when my stomach dropped. In the rearview mirror, I saw headlights. A single pair, glowing from the top of the hill I had just come down. The vehicle was not moving, just sitting there, idling quietly with its lights trained on me. My pulse quickened. I pressed the gas harder, trying to back up fast. The other car stayed perfectly still. As I got closer, I could see it was an old pickup truck, rusted along the fenders. The driver never moved, never got out. Just sat there with the engine running, blocking the only way back. I froze, foot hovering over the brake. My mind raced. The barricade ahead, the truck behind. No way forward, no way back. I thought about honking, rolling down the window, calling out, but something deep in my gut screamed not to. I shifted into park and reached for my phone. No service. The screen showed a single dead bar. That was when the truck's headlights suddenly cut out. The engine went silent. The night swallowed me. I could not even see the shape of the vehicle anymore. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I locked all the doors and kept the engine running. Minutes dragged by like hours. My eyes darted between the barricade ahead and the pitch black behind. Then I noticed movement. Shadows slipping between the stalks of corn on both sides of the road. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. But then I saw clear shapes, figures, at least 3 of them, stepping just barely into the glow of my headlights before slipping back into darkness. They were watching me, testing how close they could get without being fully seen. I slammed my hands against the wheel, panic rising in my throat. I considered flooring it into the barricade, but the logs looked solid enough to wreck my car or trap me worse. Suddenly, a sharp thud hit the side of my car. Then another. Someone was throwing rocks from the corn. One smacked against my rear window so hard I thought it would shatter. I jammed my car into drive and hit the gas. The bumper scraped against the logs but held. I reversed again, slamming the brakes and jerking the wheel. My only thought was to somehow squeeze past that truck on the hill. I sped up the incline, my headlights swinging wildly as gravel sprayed behind me. Halfway up, the truck's lights came on again. The engine roared. It pulled forward, angling sideways across the lane. I braced for the worst. My hands were slick with sweat, my chest burning with panic. At the last second, I cut my wheel to the right and floored it. The edge of the road dropped slightly into grass, but I managed to squeeze by with barely an inch between us. As I passed, I caught a glimpse of the driver. A man, middle-aged, no expression, just staring at me with his hand steady on the wheel, letting me scrape by. I did not slow down. I gunned it all the way back to the main road, my tires kicking up gravel and dirt. When I finally hit pavement, I looked in the mirror. The truck was gone. No headlights, no dust, nothing. I drove the rest of the way home, shaking, every shadow in the trees looking like it might lunge at me. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat there for 10 minutes, gripping the wheel until my knuckles were white, too afraid to move. The next day, I told my dad. He went with me to check Miller's Lane in daylight. The barricade was gone. The road was clear. There were no tire marks from another vehicle, no disturbed corn, no sign anyone had been there. But here is the detail that keeps me up at night. Along the dirt on the side of the road, we found footprints. Dozens of them. Bare footprints, large and small, circling where my car had sat trapped. I never took Miller's Lane again. In fact, I avoid every shortcut now, no matter how late or inconvenient, because that night taught me something I cannot forget. Sometimes escape is not just hard. Sometimes people make sure it is impossible. And the worst part is, they were never caught. Whoever set that trap could be out there still, waiting for the next car to make the same mistake I did. It was July of 2021 when my friends and I rented a cabin deep in the Pocono Mountains for a long weekend. There were 4 of us: me, my best friend, Eric, his girlfriend, Amanda, and our buddy, Chris. We had just finished our first year out of college and wanted a break from city noise and crowded bars. The cabin listing promised seclusion, hiking trails, and clear skies for stargazing. That word seclusion is the reason we chose it. I would never make that mistake again. The drive up there took almost 4 hours. By the time we arrived, the sun was dipping low, staining the sky orange. The cabin sat at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by thick trees. There were no neighbors in sight, no cell towers, no traffic. Just us and the woods. The first night was calm. We grilled burgers, had some beers, and sat around the fire pit. The silence of the forest was heavier than we expected, almost pressing against us. But we laughed it off, chalking it up to being city kids unused to real quiet. It was the second night when things changed. Around 10:30, Eric suggested we go for a short hike with flashlights. We followed a dirt trail that snaked behind the cabin and led into the woods. After maybe 15 minutes, Chris noticed something off the trail, a rope tied between 2 trees. At first, it looked like someone had strung up a clothesline. But then we saw more ropes. Several of them. They formed a crude barrier, like a makeshift fence cutting off the trail. Amanda said it gave her a bad feeling, so we turned back. But halfway down the trail, I noticed something else, the faint crunch of footsteps behind us. We stopped. The forest went silent. Probably an animal, Eric said quickly, trying to keep us moving. But I knew those steps had been deliberate, paced like a person's. Back at the cabin, we locked the doors and tried to shake it off. But just after midnight, when we were about to head to bed, the power cut out. The lights died, the fridge went silent, and even the router blinked off. The cabin was swallowed by darkness. We grabbed our phones for light. Amanda pulled up her screen and cursed. No service. I checked mine, same thing. We had bars the day before, but now, nothing. It was as if someone had killed the signal completely. Then came the knock. It was soft. 3 taps against the back door. None of us moved. Another knock followed, this time at the side door. Chris whispered that we should get the hell out, but when Eric tried the front door, it would not open more than an inch. Something was blocking it from outside. Panic set in. We ran to the back, but that door was jammed too. The windows had been nailed shut, every one of them. Someone had prepared for this. We huddled in the living room, whispering fiercely. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely focus. And then we heard it. Movement outside. Footsteps circling the cabin, crunching in the gravel, pausing beneath the windows. Eric held his phone like a weapon, though the battery was down to 6%. Chris whispered about trying to break a window, but Amanda begged him not to. It felt like whoever was out there wanted us to try. Minutes stretched like hours. Every creak of the cabin felt amplified. Then, through the thin curtains, I saw light. A faint glow moving between the trees. More than one. Flashlights bobbing slowly as if whoever held them was in no rush. They were not in a hurry because they knew we had nowhere to go. Around 2 a.m. we heard a sound that nearly broke me, the slow drag of metal against wood. It came from the front porch, scraping across the door. None of us dared to move. The scraping stopped, and then the footsteps retreated into the woods. We waited until dawn before making another attempt. In daylight, the barricade on the front door was clear. Someone had stacked heavy timber across the porch and wedged it into the railing. It took the four of us nearly half an hour to push it aside. Once outside, we saw more. Thin wires stretched low across the gravel driveway like trip lines. Nails scattered across the ground behind the tires of our cars. And the trail out, blocked by a thick log that had not been there before. We worked in silence, adrenaline pushing us. We cleared the wires, swept the nails, and backed both cars out carefully. As we drove away, I kept my eyes locked on the tree line. For a split second, I swore I saw someone standing there. A tall figure, half hidden, watching us leave. When we finally reached a gas station an hour away, our phones buzzed with messages that had failed to send overnight. We tried calling the police, but without knowing who had done it or where they went, there was little anyone could do. The cabin owner claimed he had no idea what we were talking about. He swore no one else had keys or access. When we pressed him about the nailed windows and the cut power, he hung up on us. To this day, I wonder if he knew more than he let on. I think about those ropes across the trail, about the flashlights moving slowly in the trees, about the way every exit had been cut off, like a trap closing in. And the worst part, we still do not know why. Whoever set that up never tried to break in, never demanded anything. They just wanted us trapped, cornered like animals, with no way out. It has been years since then, but I still cannot sleep in remote places. Anytime I hear silence that deep, I remember that weekend. I remember standing by the door with my heart pounding, realizing that the word secluded does not mean peace. It can mean pray.